feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming to you Thursday afternoon. It's October 31st. Happy Halloween. And coming up on today's show, we have Britt Robson joining us here shortly. Britt wrote a great column on Julius Randle this morning. You check that out. It's really good. But Britt writing that, knowing he was coming on the pod, got me thinking that we should do an episode that's just really focused on Julius Randle, how he's played individually, and also just kind of taking a look 4 games in, how he's fitting into the team context, and just kind of what his presence has looked like compared to what the presence of Karl Anthony Towns was in that similar sort of role last season. I did want to get on here at the beginning solo, just to again put on your radars. I know I did this yesterday before the episode, but I want to let you know that we are doing a live show, Kyle and I, at Treasure Island Resort and Casino on Friday night, November 15th. I know I told you about this yesterday before the episode, but in case you are a Brit only episode listener, there's a lot of you. I want to let you know that the Wolves play the Kings that night, November 15th at 9 p.m. It's a late night West Coast tip, and we are going to do a live show at the casino there, and stick around to watch the game. The live show is going to be at 8 p.m. The game starts at 9. Kyle and I will be there. We'll do a happy hour at 7 p.m. We'll get started there. 7 o'clock happy hour, 8 p.m. live show, 9 p.m. We'll all watch the game together. They did give me a promo code to use for you all to use if you do want to stay the night at Treasure Island. It's 15% off a room if you call 1-888-867-7829. Mention code Dane. They gave me the code TWOLV singular yesterday. I was like, that's a little confusing. Let's switch it to Dane. So the code is Dane. You just call that 1-888-867-7829 and mention code Dane. Again, if it's a longer drive for you, you're going to have a couple beverages and you do want to make a weekend out of it. Obviously, you don't have to stay the night if you don't want to, but if you do, I thought it was nice that they'll throw a little discount to listeners. So again, just put this on your radar if it's something you can do. Again, a watch party live show. Oftentimes when we do live shows, we're not actually it's not on a game night. So I'm looking forward to actually being there with people and watching a game. Again, for a room, 15% off. Call 1-888-867-7829. Mention code Dane, and they will give you 15% off your hotel stay. All that information is in the show notes, or you can go to ticasino.com for more details. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks, and it's Thursday night, so we have NBA games. We have NFL games, NFL game going on. So we often do, when Kyle and I or Jason and I or whatever are doing our picks, we kind of focus on an NFL slate or an NBA slate. You can combine them. So I picked one NFL pick for this game or for my slate for today, and one NBA pick. I'm taking CJ Stroud to throw for less than 224.5 passing yards. And for Derek Lively, who we just saw kind of beat up the Wolves, I think the Mavs play Houston tonight, and I'm going to say more than 8.5 points for Derek Lively, probably getting involved in the lob game there in that matchup. At Prize Picks, all you have to do is pick 2 players like this, 2 to 6, and the more players you put into the lineup, and the more you hit correctly, the more you win. If you haven't played Prize Picks before, all you have to do is when you sign up, if you use the promo code Dane there as well, you place a $5 lineup, they'll instantly credit you $50 into your account. Gives you a little bit of time to get used to what Prize Picks has to offer. We're having a lot of fun with it. I think it's, when you do have a night at home when you're just watching the NFL or you're watching the NBA, and maybe the Wolves aren't playing or the Vikings aren't playing. You're like, hey, I want to have a little something else extra on the line. Obviously, do it within your means. Do $5, right? If you do a $5 wager on just 2, that Stroud and Lively one, if they both hit those, your $5 turns into 15. So if that's something you're interested in, PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app, promo code Dane for a $50 bonus when you create your first lineup.
Hey, yeah.
All right, I am now joined by Britt Robson from MinPost. Britt, you wrote a column today on Julius Randle, in which the very first sentence of the article read, quote, Julius Randle looks and plays like a stack of rectangles. I'm laughing, but I really like the piece, and the analogy kind of comes together later in the article. Chris and I talked yesterday about the game specifically. I'd love to, for this episode, just kind of focus in with you on Julius, and I can tell from having read that article that you've been you went back and watched a lot and have kind of honed and sharpened your opinions on Randle. I think you talked about the concerns that you've made clear on here too, about Randle, but also wrote about how your appreciation for what he brings has really grown. Let's maybe start there. What are the areas from Julius Randle that have grown your appreciation for what he can bring specifically to this team?
Well, and it wasn't foolish to think this way. I saw him a lot in Los Angeles and New York, especially New York. He had a score-first mentality. And he has not had necessarily a score-first mentality on this team. And that is a recognition that his role on this team is not to be an ISO scorer. It is to, it's impossible for him not to play in isolation on occasion, but he gets off it faster. He is more pass conscious. And I do think he's more deferential, especially toward Ant. I think he's doing a lot of screening. He's doing a lot of the stuff that Gobert and Ant have done with the kind of the added benefit. Obviously, very, very few NBA players are as good at screening as Gobert. But the fact that Randle presents so much more of a threat out there on the perimeter, I think he can be as effective a screener as Gobert can be, because he doesn't necessarily have to roll, especially if he's hitting over 60% of his threes, which he's doing now. But also because he really is. He's quicker, and he still has a pretty wide body. And so I really enjoy. Exactly. Well, I mean, 250 pounds on 80 inches is pretty fascinating,
Yeah.
And let's face it. I mean, do you regard Randle more as a player with sharp edges, or a player who's round? The guy is clearly a block.
Yeah.
I mean, remember Pekovic. Peck was like this. Peck was a block. He wasn't round.
Yeah, right.
And so
bigger rectangle.
Yeah, exactly. And also just the way he's not somebody who is going to be smooth and slick, except on that one move that we've come to realize is one of his go-to moves, when he's on the left block and he can feint, to the left and scoop that play. That's a lot of fun to see. And it helps me with, I've made no secret of the fact that I don't like the aesthetics of his game. And when he is dishing to Mike Conley with 18 seconds on the clock, or when he is deking somebody out of their sneakers and underhanding a 8-foot banker, that's aesthetically pleasing. And that does, we obviously watch and judge the games based on winning and losing, but there is an aesthetic component to the way players play that increase or decrease our enjoyment of them. And not only has Randle been a more complete player and a more team-oriented player than I expected, but he's done some things that are aesthetically pleasing to me. His passes to Rudy the other night, even the ones where he passed twice to Rudy, Rudy got stuffed the first time, and Doncic poked the ball out of Rudy's hands on the second one, and for some reason Randolph was given the turnover on that. You explain that to me. But I do. I like his game. Do I like his game as much as Nas's game? No. Do I like his game on offense as much as Cat's game? Only if I focus on the times when Cat is mired in, in his his dysfunctional bag, and so
well,
bottom line, I see a path for Randle's steady minutes that are productive minutes, and I was a real skeptic about that, even a week ago.
What did you just call it? Cat's bag of what?
His dysfunctional bag.
Yeah. So,
well,
yeah, no, I know what that is. I know what it is. I just want to use the same term of it's what it sounds like is you thought that Randle would be in his dysfunctional bag, which occasionally, as you said, popped up in LA and New York too. And I think what's in that bag, or our understanding of what was in that bag, was that shoot first mentality that you said you have not seen be present here. And what I think is extra notable about not being shoot first is how well he is shooting and still not being shoot first. I was looking up.
Good point.
They have that like points per shot attempt, just overall on cleaning the glass. And Randle is at 1.431 points per shot attempt thus far this season, which, like you said, he's shooting 62% from three, and he's making a lot of other stuff. That 1.431 is the best in the league amongst all forwards. So I take that seriously, that this dude is, at least over the last 3 games, we're recording this before the Denver game, is on fire. He is on fire, and still, like the one play, and it happened right in front of us, and it was in that first quarter where Lively checks into the game for Gafford, and the first time Randle tries to go at him, and he's got him on the left wing where Randle can go to his advantage hand, and he's attacking Lively, who's incredible defensively, and he gives him one and he gives him two. And the Randle that I know in my head, which admittedly is not that well because I wasn't watching every New York game,
forces his way up,
gives him another one, throws the shoulder in there. Maybe he gets a charge occasionally. Maybe he draws a foul when Lively jumps there, but Lively just kind of swarms it. Randle reaches around him and finds DiVincenzo in the corner right there. Dante knocks down the shot. And if I'm on a heater, if I'm making 1.431 shots, whatever points per shot attempt, I'm probably taking that shot if I'm Julius Randle, and he's not. And that to me signals a maturity that I think Julius has likely, really grown as he's now, 29, about to turn 30 years old. So years of having a shoot first mentality, I wouldn't say those are gone, but it's noteworthy that he's getting buckets and he's still not. I mean, shoot first mentality is another word for ball hawk. And I wouldn't say Julius Randle's playing like a ball hawk
at all. And the other play I cited, it was in the third quarter. Conley had not had a bucket in the first half, and it just continued a pattern for the guy. I mean, he's doing a lot of rattle out threes that, were just straight splashes in prior years. And he's just dysfunctional. I mean, that's probably, he's a combination of unlucky and a little bit off his rhythm in so many ways. I mean, he got his pocket picked in the backcourt. They originally ruled it a foul because it was so rare. But then upon review, they found out, hey, no, he did steal the ball. And so, I mean, there's that. There's the missed shots. There's the fouling that he's usually so adept at walking that line of not fouling. He's just off. And the guy already had hit a shot earlier in just after the half. This is early in the third quarter. And they come down and Randle's got the ball in semi-transition. And as you said, he's on a pretty much season-long heater, and 3 Dallas defenders converged on him. And he could have done his whole thing. He could have gone through his bag of tricks. There was 18 seconds left on the clock. But he went right to Conley, and Conley was moving into position, caught him perfectly in rhythm. One of those passes where you say it's impossible for this guy not to make this shot. And indeed, Conley made the shot. I mean, the idea of Julius Randle helping Mike Conley out of a hole with his dishing, as they say, was not on my bingo card when they started the season. I mean, it is a sign that Chris Finch and Julius Randle really do have a kind of a mutual respect mind meld Finch has been in his corner from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like that with certain guys where he just says, you know, I'm not going to pay attention to the data for quite a while before I even, you know, and now the data is all in his favor. And yet Randle is still playing the same way. Finch is, you know, has got other problems to solve, but Julius Randle certainly isn't one of them.
No, not on the offensive side of the floor. And I don't, and maybe let's move over to the, to the defensive side, where I think, as you put it in your piece, he's neither a sieve nor a stalwart defensively. And I would kind of say that's kind of what the Wolves defense is overall right now. Right. They were a stalwart a season ago. They're certainly not sieves at this point. But it's different, you know, I think that's something, you know, it's used the bingo card analogy before. And I really feel like I learned my lesson with Jeff Teague years ago of thinking I know what are on a player's bingo card, of what their game is. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, I watch League Pass, like whatever, you know, and it's a totally different experience once we start watching players all 82 games and rewatching games. Obviously we had that experience with Gobert, right? And our appreciation for what Gobert does and doesn't do. I mean, we just get it now. You don't get it when you're watching 12 of those games.
Well, and also what happens is you also know a lot more about their teammates. It isn't even like, you know, maybe you're watching eight League Pass games. Okay, you know what 8 times these players are like. But if you watch them 50 times, then you know everybody's tendencies and you know what everybody is looking for and how they do and who enables who, why, you know? And so that, I agree. I mean, that's where you get your education when a player joins the team you cover, is you get depth on. For sure. You not only get depth on him. My point about Randle assisting Conley or deferring to Ant. I mean, these are understandings of who needs what and what role am I playing, and you don't necessarily have as keen of appreciation of that if you don't cover the team.
Right. And I say that to mean like, and I think I did this in the beginning of October of like not wanting to over input what my preconceived notions were of Randle's game. And I probably have watched Julius Randle play 40, 50 full NBA games in my, but you know, all over the place. And I wasn't watching that game specifically for Randle or maybe even the Knicks or the Pelicans or the Lakers at that point. And so I think like this time is so important for me. And I think for all of us in understanding, well, maybe there is a lot more to his playmaking. Maybe he always was less shoot first than we thought he was. And I think conversely, I thought to the defensive side of the floor on my, again, not accurate bingo card, I thought he was more of a rectangle on defense and would be able to play, was a little bit more of a center and a little bit more physical and imposing on that side. I don't think he's played bad defense, but has he like picked up a center ever in this and been like, I mean, until he was literally playing the 5 in the 4th quarter.
That's a very good point. And also the only clue you would have, because it isn't in the eye test, because again, he looks so imposing. Yeah. But his blocks and steals are way low. I mean, he's not that type of a guy. You know, he's not a disruptive defender. And you would think somebody as physically imposing as he is on offense would be disruptive. Now that, again, as I said in the piece, I'm not saying he's a bad defender because he's fundamentally pretty sound. He moves his feet. He gets a position. He knows team defense. The Laker game was an outlier because I really do think he was confused, literally confused about where he was supposed to be occasionally. And that confusion led to him just standing still and making him look really lazy, which obviously hasn't been the case since they've kind of worked that out a little bit. So I just think that I guess where, you know, we always have to check ourselves on this stuff. And I was talking about being biased against Randle, you know, even before he made me look, even worse in those earlier opinions. But another thing that I missed was this team does not have a backup center in its 9-man rotation. And I don't know why that wasn't like blatantly obvious to me.
We missed that one, man. Well, I think it was part of it. I was like,
Randle and Nas will figure it out,
I thought it would be Randle, like, knowing that it would be him and Nas, but like that almost all of Randle's minutes at the quote unquote 5 would come with Nas next to him. You're like, well, that's enough. That's like 2.
Right. This guy's big. He's imposing, but he's not imposing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, and again, and I think that's what we're learning here and we're working with. What is also in relation to the cap being gone, part of it is we're really getting to the point where it's very different defense stylistically and execution wise when Rudy is on the floor versus when Rudy is off the floor, which reminds me of the first Gobert season,
right?
Where, you bring Rudy in, he's the best drop coverage defender in the history of the NBA. So you're obviously going to play that for the 32 minutes a night that he's on the floor. But then that first season, you got Cat coming off of his best defensive year of his career. The 22-23 season was the best.
Yep.
Oh, wait.
I agree.
21.
Yeah, the Vando Pat Bev year.
Yes, best of his year. And obviously we've talked about this a million times. They're blitzing everything. They're up to touch. They're playing, they're making the high wall, as they called it. And so Finch was like, all right, so the 16 minutes a game when Carl is at the 5, we're going to play that way. And it was less so a Carl was a little less sharp on it, I thought, that season than he was the first year when he was doing it every time. But it was really about the other players.
Yeah, he didn't have Vando.
Yeah,
Vando and Pat Bev both were really helpful in that scheme.
Sure, because you could put Vando on the ball and the Jaden's your low man. We learned all about that, right? So point being is they tried to toggle these coverages. It was a disaster, right? First year, that's a big, it's the defensive side of the ball why it was a disaster with that group, exacerbated by Carl eventually getting hurt that season. I say that to bring up that they're playing two pretty different styles now, where when you have Rudy on, you're still playing Rudy in the Rudy sort of way, and everybody's playing the Rudy sort of way.
Right.
And then the first 3 games, we saw a ton of zone. Maybe not a ton. We saw zone in the Reed and Randle minutes when they were on the floor. Again, those 15, 16 minutes a night. And then against Dallas, we saw heavy switching, exclusively switching from those. And I actually don't hate Nas or Randle even as switch guys. Nas is taking it a lot more, right? Because he's functioning as the 5. He's guarding the screener most of the time. And I trust Nas's feet. I just think he's got quick feet for a 6'10" guy.
I agree.
And then even in the fourth quarter when Randle was in at the 5 by himself and he was getting the switches onto Luka, maybe it was just Luka because they're like, okay, rectangle versus rectangle. I didn't really hate that. I didn't really hate that either. But the minutes defensively have been overall bad. And I think part of that is changing stylistically how you're playing and what has been the narrative. What have people been talking about since that Dallas game? Rebounding, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's when you're switching coverages, that's where the surrounding players, they kind of lose their intention or their understanding of what they're doing. And that's Dante DiVincenzo. That's Anthony Edwards. Realizing when you're in a switching defense and Nas is out here 24 feet away from the basket, well, you got to get your ass in there and you got to box out and you got to rebound.
Right.
And I think the coverage is, well, it's not complicated to play a switching defense. This is switching versus playing high wall is a significantly more simplistic thing, but there's still a disconnect going on. That reminds me of that first season. And Randle's got to be part of the answer there. He's, I mean, as much as Nas does, I think. And that's for this team to be a good top 5, 10 or better defense this season, that part has got to be cleaned up. And that group with Rudy off the floor has to have a defensive identity like the Wolves found with the Cat at the 5 minutes, the second year of the Gobert Towns thing. Sorry, end of tangent.
Right. And that's kind of discouraging because I don't see it,
I don't either.
Frankly. You know?
Good thing to remind ourselves 4 games in, we don't see it. It's 4 games. But,
exactly,
but if I'm being honest, I don't see it either.
And you know, I mean, and Finch has outsmarted us many times before.
Yeah, so smarter than us.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So there is definitely the possibility that they will figure it out. Mm-hmm. And he did for a very brief time in that Iowa game against the Sixers. he played Randle at the 5 and Jade McDaniels at the 4, and it wasn't a good mix at all. It lasted like
Sixers?
Yeah.
Julius didn't play
in Iowa. Don't you remember?
Yeah,
Philadelphia 76.
Yeah, but Randle
didn't
play.
Was it Randle?
Randle only played in the Chicago game.
Who was it then? When did
Nas? You like Nas?
On it was Nas. That's right. Okay, that's right. Well, whatever it was a small ball lineup that. That's right. It was Garza, heavy Garza minutes. Right. So that's why it looked small. You're right. But the point being is he wanted McDaniels at the 4, and quite frankly, the way Jaden is defending right now, having him at the 4 is not,
don't hate it.
DDV and Na right now are better perimeter on-ball defenders than Jaden McDaniels. And I don't know why that is, but I believe that to be true. And I think that Jaden still does some really good things, but I think leveling
he's not confident right now. I mean, he's off.
Leveling him up to bigger wings or 4s, I think, at least temporarily, is not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And I was actually very pleased with, especially how the offense worked in that small ball lineup. But their defense wasn't that bad either. The Dallas game now I'm back to. And so when you had Randle at the 5, what's interesting, I mean, when he was in New Orleans, he played like 35% of his minutes at center, according to Basketball Reference. Now, a lot, exactly. A lot of that was because they didn't, it was by default. But he also, when he was in Los Angeles, played some center. Again, that's like the dark ages where, the defense changed so much. But still, in New York, very rarely. The most he ever played center in his 5 years, it was 7%, I think, in one of his 5 seasons there. It averaged out to less than 5% of his minutes. But if you say, all right, you're going to be the center, or if you make Randle the center and Nas the 4 in your switch heavy schemes, I actually don't think that's a bad, and it isn't any worse, I guess I should say. I still think there's problems with it. What I found
toy with it. They'll toy with that. I think it's been a lot of.
And what I found revealing was, and we saw the new mature Ant after the game. I thought, where he basically said, I'm big, I can be down there. I'm not banging down there, and he's right. I mean, he is somebody who is going to have to do some paint defense in that second unit to make that work. And same thing with DiVincenzo, and certainly, all the guys, everybody but Joe Ingles, poor Joe Ingles is just too slow to play the NBA right now.
Slow, yes. Let me grab our first break. One more thing defensively I want to talk about with this team and Randle. But today's show is brought to you by Stone and Skillet English Muffins. And this will be our last time we have Stone and Skillet as a sponsor on for a little bit. And I just want to just seriously implore you guys to try it. You can go to stoneandskillet.com to get information or purchase English muffins from them there. They're also at Whole Foods. When I go grocery shopping at Whole Foods, I pick up a pack. They're right in the bread section right there. Just look around a little bit. You won't be able to miss them. They are, if you are a person who's, having, toast in the morning or some sort of carb, there's value in having that carb have something to it. And these English muffins, while, they're heavy, they do have 6 grams of protein to them. And honestly, if you're a big, making breakfast sandwiches type person, going from one of those airy sort of English muffins to these, which are significantly more substantial. I really like them. Price is comparable. Obviously it's a company that's supporting us. So we'd love it if you guys would support them, but genuinely, I did not think it was possible to have this big of an upgrade on something so simple as an English muffin. I really like these, and would love if you would support Stone and Skillet. So again, stoneandskillet.com. You can check out, learn more about them there. And then also just at Whole Foods, make it part of your order. Put it in your little, DoorDash order or your Whole Foods direct from Amazon sort of thing. Just try it out when you're going through for the bread, Stone and Skillet. We would love if you guys would try that out. All right, Britt. One more thing. This is kind of continuing on the defense, but not at, well, I guess this is somewhat specific to Randle. The transition defense has been terrible. No team has allowed more transition opportunities through 4 games than the Wolves have, which is also something that happened the first Gobert and Towns season when they were figuring out which big is guarding which big when we run back there, or who's got who. That
Absolutely.
got so much better year 2 of the experiment, right? They brought in Corliss Williamson as an assistant coach, and one of his main jobs was to rectify the transition defense problems, and he worked directly with Cat. And Cat was a huge part of them figuring out the transition defense problem that they were having. And transition defense isn't Rudy's fault, but by where Rudy positions himself on the floor, right? He's often in the dunker spot, or he's setting a screen and he's coming down to get an offensive rebound. So Rudy, even if he is hustling, which he often does, if the 5 is leaking out, that Rudy's not going to be able to catch him. And we saw that multiple times at the beginning of the game against Dallas on Tuesday. And I think it's just one of those things where Rudy got used to playing with Cat, who was often at the top of the key. And Cat was like, all right, this big is leaking out. I could check Daniel Gafford here. I guarded him for the first 8 years of my career. And Carl did that, and somebody picked it up. Nobody's picking that up now. A lot of that falls on the other guys, but it also highlights kind of how Randle views himself positionally different than Cat did. Cat was playing the 4, but was like, I am a 5. That was sort of his thing. Randle's like, I'm a 4, and I guard that guy. And part of it is he's going to have to acclimate and learn that this is what they're going to need playing with a Rudy Gobert type player. But as of right now, the transition defense is bad. And these things specifically in the Rudy minutes need to be understood because what's going to happen is these coaches are going to see that on film. Even Jokic is going to run tomorrow. He's going to close out on shooters. He's going to run, and Aaron Gordon's going to hit him with a big hit ahead pass. Right. And he's going to get buckets there. And then let alone once they start playing fast centers like Charlotte on Monday, they're just going to do that. It's going to become the book until the Wolves address this issue. It's a team-wide issue, but it's a product of Randle replacing Cat to some extent.
And in fairness to Randle, and DiVincenzo for that matter, the Knicks were monsters on the offensive glass, and that's where they invested. They invested, if somebody leaks out, great. That's more people we can crush on the boards when we go to get the rebound. I don't know how many transition opportunities the Knicks allowed, but I do know that their gamble of we will get putbacks more than they will get leakouts was a successful gamble. I don't think the Wolves have the dogs to do that. I mean, Hart is arguably the best inch-for-inch offensive rebounder in the NBA. And, the other guys, Bridges, who wasn't there last year, but they have some tough guys who really get after the boards. And that's Tibbs basketball. It's something that and Mitchell Robinson and Hartenstein obviously was fantastic at it. And so it's going to be an adjustment for Randle to realize, hey, we're not necessarily focused as much on getting offensive rebounds. In fact, you mentioned Corliss Williamson. That was how he created habits, is that, the Wolves' way of adjusting after the, monstrous first half of that 22-23 season, or 23, whenever it was, 2 years ago, was that they began to not leak out at all. They began to, and so, they would get back and just abandon offensive rebounding. It is going to be, again, a combination of personnel and system. And one of the things that I noticed and one of the things I put in the column is you would think, you could say, well, these 2 players or these 3 players, they'll be this if we do this. But you don't know what you have yet in that 5-player, 4-player, 3-player interaction. I mean, what if Mike Conley isn't vintage Mike Conley? What if Mike Conley is going to take a step back this year? I mean, it's obviously only 4 games, and I don't believe that's going to happen. But I think my point is you're accruing sample size, but at the same time, you're really betting on past performance as you're devising schemes.
Can I pause you right here? Because I literally
Sure.
just Chris Hine, what practice is going on as we're recording this, and he's talked to Mike Conley and just tweeted this out. And this is from Chris Hine. He said, Mike Conley went more in depth on his wrist issue today, said he was in and out of braces / casts all summer, didn't really pick up a ball until training camp. It's an old ligament issue he will need to have surgery on when he retires. He's getting back up to speed now. Finch, when I was at practice yesterday, referenced some of that too, with the wrist being part of it. So I don't say that to give Conley a pass.
No.
But it gives us a hint of optimism that this won't remain that way.
The guy's a pro. On the other hand, it's fascinating, is it, that it's my little rant, I guess. The Gobert Cat first season was blatantly sabotaged by the fact that they didn't really want to bother with getting those guys in sync during the preseason. And the same thing happened. Julius Randle was chomping at the bit to play in this preseason. And they waited until the next to last game. They played him a half, maybe a 3/4, and that was it.
Right.
Surprise, surprise. Julius Randle is not ready to function smoothly with this team. Meanwhile, Mike Conley's been in and out of braces the whole time, and so on and so forth. And, how about, no Mike Conley? If anybody can, can understand the Wolves system, sit him. Don't play him the entire preseason and say Mike Conley has a wrist injury.
Fair.
Why wait for 4 games of half-ass Mike Conley?
Yeah. Why wait to bring it up until he sucks? Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's like
totally fair.
Be consistent. If Julius Randle, you're saving him for the regular season and you're therefore punting some really crucial, grounding time. Now, I understood he played really hard in inter-squad, and I was led, and knew it was true that he was working hard with his teammates, but there's no replacing, opponents and crowd and, the point being,
from the opponent,
you're over resting Julius Randle and you're under resting Mike Conley, and both of those things are hurting you the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. I always go to just as much as Finch knows more than us, like the medical staff would know more than us too, or maybe that's on Mike to make that more apparent than he did. That would be my guess on that.
Right.
Where he kind of was diminishing it, or maybe didn't think it was that big of an issue. And then, you start playing in the actual games and maybe it feels more like it. I don't know. If it is the wrist though, then it isn't like he's degenerating.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? From like a speed and burst and whatever.
Right. No, I totally agree. No, and you said, it's good news. And I think relative to the alternative, which is he's 37 years old in his 19th NBA season, I think it obviously is better. But again, it's 2020 hindsight. But guess what? I have to exercise hindsight because I didn't know what was going on the entire time it was going on. So now in hindsight, I will say probably better to have given Conley even more rest than he got. And he got a lot of rest. I mean, it's not like they wore him out in the preseason. But just say, Mike Conley is dinged up right now. And, and we're gonna bring him back. And DiVincenzo, basically earned a solid point guard slot there. So anyway, good break in because we were just talking about Mike Conley and that's significant news. And again, I don't think it can be overestimated how much Conley is a regulator of attitude on this team. Somebody who I defy anybody to go talk to Mike Conley and walk away not feeling better about themselves than when they showed up.
Yeah, right.
You know, the guy is just somebody who calms you down, makes you think clearly. He has a gift. He should be an NBA coach someday. He's certainly a fantastic locker room presence. And on the court, if he is having to fight his own battles with his own body and injuries, then that's going to be a distraction for him. And therefore, he's not going to be. And also, even though he is so respected, when somebody is struggling, you know, you don't lean on them as much, just, you know, and so it is a situation where this is not going to help with this acclimation process. You know, if we're waiting for Conley to be full speed and his old self, that was just the point I was making before we began talking about this injury, is that everything refracts off everything else. You know, I mean, if Gobert is hurt, you know, it means something to Ant. It means something to everybody on the team. So again, it's one of the things that is clear right now about the Wolves. And I kind of poo-pooed this when people were saying, oh, interesting that they made the Cat trade. They're kind of punting on all the momentum they had last year. And I kind of went, no, not really. You know, I think we'll be fine when, you know, the Wolves will be fine when it comes to this stuff. And those people, in at least some respects, are right.
Right.
This adjustment is a slowing down process and will hurt the ultimate one-loss record at the end of the year.
Well, an interesting in relation to that of the momentum that they had, you know, we think about the pinnacle of the momentum of the Cat era was the Denver series.
Absolutely.
And what he was able to do in that, and how they as a team, because of Cat, were able to guard Jokic and ultimately slow down Denver. The Wolves play Denver, you know, Friday night. And this is going to be our first look at, you know, at the Wolves playing against them. And I know, and understandably so, people have, like, Denver isn't the king of the hill in the West anymore. They're part of that group. Everybody's kind of anointed the Thunder. Some people do think the Wolves are, you know, the best team in the West. I think Dallas is the most intact version of themselves from a year ago. But I do think the Nuggets are in the mix and still a threat in the Western Conference, and a threat to the Wolves ultimately coming out of the Western Conference. And while you can say they got worse in the offseason, the Wolves probably got worse at being able to guard them.
Absolutely. I mean, that's not even a question.
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting. But I could push back on that now, though. I mean, now Denver is playing in their starting lineup, depending how you feel about Christian Brown, who has actually been shooting it well thus far this season, is now starting Gordon and Brown, who are two questionable shooters. Whereas last year it was Gordon and KCP, and that's just one questionable shooter in Gordon. So there might be, and I'm just curious to see how the Wolves handle this on Friday, how they're just going to match up with it, because if the first 4 games are any indication, well, the job is going to be Rudy's and Rudy's alone.
And that's the matchup that matters. The matchup that matters against Denver is going to be if Jokic makes Rudy look clownish. And he has on a semi-regular basis. And
very regular.
And so
go back to that bubble series, Nuggets Jazz.
And go back to and I mean, and much more recently, the middle 3 games or whatever of that Denver series last year. I mean, Jokic was toying with him. It was the part of the narrative, the momentum of Gobert being overrated was the way Jokic played him. And
which
again,
was actually about, like, when Cat was guarding him, Rudy was there as a second line of defense. when Rudy was on Jokic, there was no second line of defense. It was like, Rudy, you're the defensive player of the year. You got to guard Jokic. And he couldn't. And I don't think anybody,
yeah, and
whoever else you think was going to win defensive player of the year, AD,
right.
How many times AD got cooked by Jokic? Like nobody can.
And to your point further, one of the great things about Cat being on Jokic was that it took away Jokic's passing lanes, because Gobert is a great lurker, and he is people don't realize, how similar Draymond Green and Rudy Gobert are in terms of what they excel at most in defense, which is understanding where everybody is on the floor and knowing their teammates should be where they are and being in the right place to cover for those teammates all the time. Draymond Green is a fantastic defender. He is not a great on-ball defender. Right. Rudy Gobert is a much better on-ball defender than Draymond Green, but his on-ball defense isn't even like in the top 2 or 3 things that is best about him on defense.
Right.
He is a great communicator. He is a great 2-on-1 defender in terms of being able to kind of sidle to indicate he's going to be one place when he's not necessarily going to have to be there. He's just a very mature, studious, knowledgeable defender, as well as being 7 feet tall and somebody who works really hard at his craft. But against Jokic is his equal intellectually, and Jokic, a great scorer versus a great defender, almost always favors the scorer.
Yeah.
And Jokic cutting up a defender and knowing where the weaknesses are as he's doing it in terms of where the other players on the court are is why I fear for that Gobert Jokic matchup, because not only is Gobert at a disadvantage on the one-on-one, but the Wolves as a 5-person unit are at a huge disadvantage because they don't have a great lurker, off the ball. That's not going to be Nas. It's not going to be, Randle. It's, I don't know. Maybe it's DiVincenzo. If I'm thinking about people who might be able to be good lurkers,
Well, the lurk worked because you put somebody else on Jokic.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see for a regular season game, does Finch adjust the rotation to play Nas and Rudy together more so as to be able to put Nas on Jokic and let Rudy lurk? That's not what the rotation has been thus far this season, right? We're trying to pair the Nas and Randle minutes together. So that'll be interesting, to see how much it go to that. I don't think it's not gonna it's a completely different thing if it's Rudy. Right. What makes the lurk work is it's Rudy 7'2" at the rim and also has the ability to close back out and guard Aaron Gordon there. I watched 2 Denver games. I watched their game against the Clippers, and then I watched their game on Tuesday against the Nets. And that was just random. Those were just like the 2 I had time to do, but it was really interesting from a Jokic matchup standpoint, where in the Clippers game, it's Zubats on Jokic, and Jokic takes 12 threes.
Right.
In that game.
And scores 41 points.
And scores 41 points, and they lose. The Nuggets lose. Versus they play Brooklyn on Tuesday, and Dorian Finney-Smith is guarding Jokic. You know how many threes Jokic shot in that game?
1.
0.
Okay.
So Rudy would be more of the Zubats type, where you're like, okay, I'm going to spread out the floor here, pull Zubats out, pull Rudy out. And, like if it was Nas or Randle on Jokic without Rudy out there, it'd be like the Dorian Finney-Smith thing where now you're bringing doubles on it. And that's the way I would assume they would approach it. But I kind of feel like if you're Denver, you're kind of doing the Wolves and Rudy a favor by just shooting threes.
Absolutely.
If you're Jokic. But I'm just pointing out that's what happened in that Clippers game. And it was, you don't shoot 12 threes on accident.
Right. Well, you know what you reminded me of, though, when you were talking about Nas? when Rudy had his child and was out that game,
Game
Nas actually did a really good job on Jokic that game. He wasn't the primary guy, obviously, but if you recall, I mean, they went in. It was game 2, maybe.
Yeah, it was
and
game
they blitzed them. I mean, it
that was the
phenomenal
crazy defense game.
Phenomenal defense all around. But Nas on Jokic in the paint a number of times. I remember Nas having as well as everybody else on the team, but him having a great game. Obviously, Cat had a great game. McDaniels had a great game. But Nas was actually really good on defense that day.
I'm trying to remember of what that looked like in that game when there was no Rudy and the ball was, and so it's Nas and Cat out there. And
well, they were swarming. They were swarming defense.
It was double. It was doubles. It wasn't like Cat was lurking, right? Like they were bringing.
You remember that was the game Nob bedeviled Murray all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, they really they clustered on the perimeter.
So which was the Nets thing we were talking about. It was the Finney Smith versus the Zubats.
Yeah, it probably was. And again, Denver obviously made adjustments, when Rudy came back. And all I can say is that Jokic, it's kind of like when I think about the problems facing the Wolves, I figure, okay, well, Finch will essentially figure out something that will be better than what I can imagine. Jokic will figure out a way to whatever he is confronting in this game on Friday, he will do the best possible thing. I mean, that's why he's should be MVP 4 years in a row, quite frankly.
It's just it sucks if for Denver, if we're Denver, and the best thing is Jokic shooting threes, and I would assume part of that was because now it's Gordon and Brown, or there's
and also a cold Murray. Murray has not been on his game, and then the other person is Porter, who he's a fascinating guy. And he's one of those guys that whenever I start to like him, he does something that makes me think he's not
good. You cut out.
Hey, he's not bad. So anyway.
All right. What else do I have anything? Do we have anything else on that Nuggets matchup that anything you're in particular locked in on for that game?
Well, I mean, I do think the bench has killed them. Westbrook and Saric are not doing their jobs. And I got to be honest with you,
that was good in the Brooklyn game. Westbrook had 22 in the Brooklyn game.
That's fine. But I got to tell you, he's one of those guys that, like, when he's good, you kind of cheer him on because you hope he continues to try to do those things, Well,
that's why he's going to probably come in tomorrow because he's coming off of playing well. I mean, I'm with you. Like,
right.
Russ is not a reliable character in anything.
Well, I mean, and if it's DiVincenzo, who's the backup point guard, and they come in together, I'll take that matchup.
Yeah, it might be a fight too. Yeah, no, I mean, I watched the first Clippers game, and I think I was saying this to you on Media Row. Sarge and Russ checked in together. It's my first time watching them play with Denver, and they're playing the Clippers. And Harden gets Sarge on a switch, and it was just like,
yes,
here you go, layup. And then the Nuggets go down the other way, and Russ catches it at 16 feet, and he's like, airballs a mid-range jump shot. And I was like, oh my God, those are supposed to be the two guys that they got to fix the bench, which was a major issue.
What happened to Peyton Watson? I mean, I really had high hopes for him, and
I didn't look at what his line was in that game. I actually have it up here. He had a couple they need him to be like the early career Jaden. Low. I mean, because that's when I've watched these Nuggets games too. Like, you start moving the ball, you get in a pick and roll, and you start moving it and getting it from side to side, and they're trying to run that same low man protection sort of thing that the Wolves got good at that 1 year. Well, when you're not good at that, we know what that looks like. Layups.
Yep.
And it's looked to me, from what little I've watched, it's looked like a lot of that, and it's because your low men are, Julian Strother, Peyton Watson, these guys in mixed lineups coming in and not doing it. So I think Denver has more of an offensive advantage in this matchup than they did before, just because the Wolves can't match up the way they used to, or it can't, or won't start that way. that maybe they'll get to it with Nas. But Denver, I really have grown in my appreciation for Jokic as a defender, like over the last 2 years. Like I think he's like a good defensive center.
He is a good defensive center.
But it's within the context of a defensive group that got how they were playing. Mm-hmm. This Denver group doesn't get that yet. So the Wolves, particularly if Jokic is taking advantage of Rudy one-on-one in the post down there, it's going to kind of be like the Dallas thing where they're going to need to score with them in the Jokic minutes and then dominate the non. Well,
and also KCP, Caldwell Pope, has led them in net rating, I think, almost every season. Maybe Jokic is better, but he has been a phenomenal, valuable glue guy on that team. And a lot of that is both spacing the floor with threes. He's always the fifth option in that old great starting lineup and would kill you with it. But he also did a lot of things that, quite frankly, when they were at their peak, Bruce Brown would come in and do almost the exact same things. And now they don't have either one of those guys to do those things, which are just this kind of like ball pressure, swing the ball, get back on, and match up in transition. I mean, all the little things that you want your fourth and fifth guys to do well to help your stars. KCP is one of the great, backbench, value guys in the league, and losing him and plugging in Christian Brown. I get it because I've always liked Christian Brown. I think that he's rugged and he's enthusiastic, but he just isn't as smart yet. He doesn't have the experience, and KCP took a while to get into this kind of value. And, and as good as Porter tries really hard, Murray is an underrated defender, but I don't think that they have that connectivity anymore, especially on defense. And Jokic, as perceptive as he is on defense, like almost everything else he does, his mind improves his skill sets so much more than you would imagine. But there's weak links on defense out there for them.
Well, a big difference for them too, to the KCP to Christian Brown point, is now that's your Ant matchup. That's his guard.
Oh, right.
Unless they go to Gordon there, but I think Gordon's got to guard Julius, right?
Yeah. And I actually think that DiVincenzo should have a big game. Yeah. For a lot of reasons.
If they move the ball, he will. Or he will get the clean looks. Will you hit him?
And also, if Conley's woes are out of the closet, then I also think he may get some more time at the one. And I think some of his problem has been usage and rhythm. He was getting heavy minutes in the preseason, and he really enjoyed, that rhythm. And it's harder for him coming into the game, especially as hot as Randle has been, and the need to get Ant and Randle, squared away and everything. And Rudy getting his touches. That's been a real point of emphasis. I think it wouldn't surprise me to see DiVincenzo finally break out against Denver. It seems like a good opponent for that to happen.
And they probably need that.
They do. They do.
I'm just telling, just to listeners, if you haven't caught any Denver games, like, everybody really piled on them after those first two games, and rightfully so. They look, I didn't watch the opener, but that Clippers game, they look like a mess. Now they played Toronto and Brooklyn in their next two games, and they had to go to overtime.
And barely beat Brooklyn, right.
But I'm just saying, like, I do not think that this is like a free win at all for the Wolves, and they're not like some completely bleeding out dysfunctional team right now. And even if it took them overtime in some of those games, I think particularly at the end of that Brooklyn game, they kind of found some rhythm of how they want to play late game too, which has also been a staple of them. So I don't know. They're 2-2. Wolves are 2-2. They're probably 2 wins are less impressive than the Wolves' 2 wins. But I'm not putting a fork in Denver yet. And I think it leads to a really interesting game on national TV on late on Friday night that we're gonna have here, because this is like as close to a rivalry as I think the Wolves have, if we talk about tenure and it going for a while. Right. And it's the pieces on the chessboard have been moved around, or it's different pieces on the chessboard for both teams. So I'm looking forward to it.
And just as the Wolves have kind of had Denver's number for various reasons because of matchups in the past, San Antonio has given the Wolves a lot of problems in the last 2 or 3 years. And
not even there yet in my head, but yeah, you're right. That's Saturday.
and that's on the road after a home game on a back-to-back. Mm-hmm. But then you have, you play Portland like 3 times in 8 days. I know, yeah, and you got Charlotte before then. You got a chance to make some hay. But if you can stack Denver and San Antonio and go into that stretch 4-2, you can begin to. It's always easier to coach a team that has momentum, not only this year, but is saying, oh, we're getting back to what we knew we had last year. Right. That kind of mindset really makes people more coachable. The rhythm, it's like oiling the gears, Right. You don't have that doubt, clogging things up. Mm-hmm. And I think 3-3 or 2-4 really throws that cake schedule into doubt a little bit. And so I think there's important games for that reason.
Yeah, no, man, I'm looking forward to it. It's, again, a fun part about having a new team or new pieces on a team,
right,
is that every game at the beginning of the season is a lot more interesting. There's a lot more to react to, try to not overreact to it. But yeah, the Nuggets game will be fun. And then, that Spurs one too. I haven't watched anything from them since the opener against Dallas. But that's what's coming up. That's what's coming up next. The next pod won't be until Monday after both of those games. We're gonna push Kyle to next week and not do a Friday pod, because we've now done multiple pods since the Dallas game. So that's what's coming up next here on the show. We kind of talked about Britt's Julius Randle piece. I think it was really well, like, I'm getting to know you piece, and Britt did it in his way. And just obviously we know Britt's intimately watching this team day in and day out, but it's maybe if you've missed a game or two of the Wolves' first 2 games, you're like, how is Randle sort of fitting in? Obviously you can watch the game on Friday, but in the meantime, grab a cup of coffee and read a Britt column. Also, when you go and read Britt's piece at midpost.com, it pops up to sign up for Britt's and One newsletter. You just put your first, last name, email address in there, and Britt wrote about Nickeil Alexander-Walker in that. And it's for those of you who listened on Monday, it's the clip I played of Finch talking about Nickeil's sort of process of growth and meeting Mike Conley. Awesome answer that you heard here. Maybe you saw me post on Twitter. Britt wrote about that as well. So always love it, just to get you all reading about this team, in addition to listening to all these guys talk on the pod. Thanks for doing it, Britt.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
We'll circle back next week, I guess, maybe after the Charlotte game and before the Chicago game.
I'm going to write on voting day, Tuesday, for Wednesday, probably. Okay. Because you've got the back-to-back, I think, is it Thursday and Friday?
Yeah, Thursday in Chicago and then back here on Friday. Maybe that's one of the first Portland game. Yeah. But against at home against the Blazers. So starts coming fast and furious, right, man? It's like
15 games in November.
Jesus.
15 out of 30. So every other day for a month, and I thought, wow, that's a lot. And then I looked, and it pretty much is the normal schedule.
We learn at the beginning of the year how this all works. All right. Well, next up, Wolves Nuggets on Friday, Spurs Wolves on Saturday. Then Jason and I will get together to talk about those 2 games on Monday morning. Read Britt over at MinPost. Follow him on Twitter at Britt Robson, tweeting feverishly during the games next to me on Media Row, where you do your little, like, something happens, you do your little swipe to your screen, and you're like, get the tweet out. It's
you know, the best thing that ever happened to me was treating Twitter like a note. Well, yeah. Almost, maybe top 10 ever. Was like treating Twitter like a notebook, you know, because then I can go back. It's like, I was gushing about Randle during that game.
Oh, I thought we were going to get a John in there. Damn it.
No way, man.
Damn it.
Though there's more coming. I got to parse them out now, you know.
You gave him it wasn't John Randle, but you said Randolph at one point, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe you were talking about Randolph. I don't know.
What was funny was we were in the media dining room, and somebody said, you know, something about I was trying to clarify something. Are you asking me who I think is a better player, Naz Reid or John Randle? I mean, I wasn't on the air. It was just like a conversation with somebody. You know?
The brain worm. The brain worm is in.
Here you go. You know, I'm still there. So yeah, I am actually just like it's gotten to the point where you notice I try to correct it immediately when it happens now, but at the same time, I've come to terms with it. I mean, obviously, if I've done it as often as I've done it, I kind of just have to factor it in and blend it, bake it into my presentation. On the other hand, none today. So
I know.
You never know. The minute I finally accept my fate, maybe it goes away.
Everybody at the John Randle drinking game stayed sober, unfortunately. I saw somebody in the comments say, well, what it should be is we have to drink every time he says Julius Randle. That's
a good one, actually, because that's that maybe my contrary streak will put me back on track.
Well, it is Halloween, so maybe, you know, everybody's having a couple evening beverages.
Let that eye black out and go get some candy.
All right. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. He's Britt Robson. Follow him on Twitter at Britt Robson. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Until Monday with JC's Britt, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.